This program is underwritten in part by
Janelle Encarnacion Art. Carlos Furniture, a family-owned business, has been providing furniture, appliances, and household accessories since 1997. The flagship store on St. Croix and another on St. Thomas are both open for in-store shopping and are able to ship to various locations in the Caribbean.
and viewers like you. The views expressed on this program are not necessarily those of WTJX, its board, staff, or underwriters.
Welcome to the Bookcase. I'm your host, Shawna Richards, a sometime writer and a longtime reader. I invite you to join me as we explore the bookcase and celebrate Virgin Islands authors and talent. Each week on the Bookcase, we'll introduce you to a local author and learn more about them and their work. A storyteller lives in each of us, and I'm so excited to give our homegrown storytellers a chance to tell their stories. Tonight's selection from the Bookcase is Rika and the Tamarind Tree, and I am so honored to welcome its author, Valrica Bryson. Valrica, welcome to the Bookcase. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me, Shawna. I'm so glad and elated to be here.
And we're just so proud to be able to showcase yet another Virgin Islands writer. But our audience probably knows you as Valrica Bryson, the educator, the culture bearer. But let us tell us a little bit about Valrica Bryson, the writer.
Ooh, Valrica Bryson, the writer. I started writing when I was younger. My brother and I, we love writing poetry. So I've written a lot of poetry. And then I decided that, I should write about my life and how we grew up on St. Croix. And I think it would, I thought it would be a real good thing for students and children to read about the adventures, I had as a little girl and with my brothers and my sisters and my friends in the neighborhood. So I thought it was, something to do, to venture out of just writing poetry, you know?
So Rika and the Tamarind Tree is based on your young life,
Yes.
growing up on St. Croix. And the Rika in the story certainly has your entire face, your smile, eyes, everything. How did you find that illustrator to so perfectly capture who you are?
Well, I could give you a story about the illustrator. First off, he knows me. He knew me for a while because he went to the St. Croix Educational Complex High School. He was in the art program at the high school. He's a real good artist. His name is Akimo Lionel, Staff Sergeant. Probably be a little higher in rank now. I'm not sure. Staff Sergeant Akimo Lionel. He went to Complex for 4 years. He knew me there. I also sent him a lot of pictures of me as a child for him to come up with the illustration that he came up with. He did a superb job with that, a real good job with that. He
He
did.
certainly did. So in Rika and the Tamarind Tree, when we are introduced to Rika, she and her brothers are off on an adventure, which takes them to the biggest tamarind tree in search of the best fruit. And what we see about Rika is that she's fearless. She's not listening to any warnings or anything. How much of Valrica is there in that Rika and the Tamarind Tree story?
Every single bit of that Rika and that tamarind tree is the Rika you know today. The Rika who challenges herself, the Rika who just feels that nothing is impossible. And even if I didn't get it the first time, I'm gonna try the second, third, fourth time until it's done or until I achieve that goal. It's just who I am. I like a challenge and I don't stop. It's just to get out there and just take the chance. You never know what happens when you take that chance. you could fall real hard.
when you were writing this story, um, or when you thought about writing this story, why did you set out to write a children's story?
I thought that um, our kids in the VI, well, kids all over. They. I don't want to put a whole stigma on all of them, but for them to see what's going on the outside, like what you could do outside, you could ride your bike, you could go climb a tree, especially in the Virgin Islands. For me, in the Virgin Islands, we have all these tambran trees, we have kenep trees. It's summertime. That time we used to just go all over to the beach. So it's just for kids to see it's more than just sitting down inside and watching television or playing on a Nintendo, or it's just you could do a lot more, and hopefully it inspire kids to do a lot more. And that's why I wrote it for kids, for them to get some kind of inspiration to be explorers.
How important, as an educator, how important is it for children to open a book and see characters that look like them?
Oh, it's first off, seeing people that look like them is just is very important. As growing up as a child, um, I didn't know no black artists until I got to high school. You know, um, I had Mistress LaRock in the St. Croix Central High School in 12th grade, and she was the first teacher to introduce me to black authors. And to know that it had black people writing books, it was like, what?
Mm-hmm.
Really? Everything was made by, other people, but you never saw anybody that looks like you writing a book.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, people from the VI. I think one of the inspirations for me was this young man I work with named Johanse Henley. Johanse, he wrote some Anansi stories, and I
Mm-hmm.
was telling him about my idea for my books, and he was like, "Miss B, write it, write it. You need to write it, Miss B. Go ahead and write it." I was like, "Oh, I write poetry, but I'm not sure if I could write a story."
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, "No, go ahead and write the story." And he's actually the one that helped me put the book together.
Okay.
So when I saw, the younger generation, another person that inspired me in writing too was Zaid Salim. Zaid
Mm-hmm.
wrote, Zaid also wrote a book. So,
Right.
with having two young people that's around you and they're doing it, and you're like, okay, I'm an old crook, but I'm gonna still try to do this thing. you know?
How much of a leap was it for you to go from writing poetry to go to writing prose and fiction?
Oh wow. It was like, okay, so the poetry really was about my life too. Just poems about things that happened, over my like when I was in elementary school, things that happened there, things that happened when I was in junior high and high school and college, the poems were about that. So I figured it would be easy to sit and write about my life. Now I
Mm-hmm.
have an editor because I ain't perfect, and it's funny how I bumped into this editor. Um, we were working on a project, and I was telling her about my book, and she was like, "You know what?" I said to her, "Miss Kresge, I'm writing this book about about my life and all of that." She said, "You're writing a memoir?" I was like, "Oh, okay, I'm writing a memoir." She said, "You're writing a memoir?" I was like, "Okay, yeah, I'm writing a memoir, but I don't have an editor." So Miss Kresge said, "Oh, I would love to read. I would love to be an editor." So I mean, everything worked out. Yes, 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 yes.
When you started writing Rika and the Tamarind Tree, who are your early readers? Who are the people that you are most comfortable sharing your work with and that you can rely on for honest critique and feedback?
I shared my book with my niece, Miss Siamara Ericilla Siamara Otley Herman. I shared it with her, and I shared it with my granddaughter.
Mm-hmm.
My granddaughter, she's a storyteller. She tells stories herself, and I gave her the book to read, and she started reading, and she didn't put it down. And I was like, "Oh, wait!" she didn't put up my book. Ain't that bad after all? And so when she finished reading it, she was like, "Wow, yeah." She calls me auntie, and she said, "Auntie, this is good. You really followed tambourine tree, you don't listen. She was like, Uncle Junior and Uncle Ray were talking to you and you didn't listen. I said, no, I didn't listen. So, so she was my first critic. She was my first critic. But she
When
introduced.
now that your book has been published and is available, what types of feedback are you getting from readers?
Oh, I had, well, when I posted it on Facebook, a lot of people said they wanted it for like the classroom. So the teachers that I knew that wanted the book, I ordered the book and I sent it out to some of the teachers. And then this lady said that this school wanted to get the book in St. Thomas for the whole school. So she ordered the book. And I was like, whoa, wow, the book is getting out there. And then another lady called me. She said, you know, I saw that your book was on Facebook and I went and I bought it and I read it. When are you coming up with the next one? I was like, girl, you know, and and so people started calling me about the book and where can they get the book and stuff like that. So I was like, it must be all right book, you know, it must be all right. So
Well, I think part
yeah,
of the charm is that, again, representation, people being able to see themselves. But you wrote a book about your adventures, about a young girl's adventures. When you
right.
were growing up and when you were reading, were you reading books that had young women having big adventures?
No, no, honestly, no. Not like the adventures. Like my next book is Rika in the Cow Field. So it's not gonna be a good one too. No, I didn't read books that really depicted people's lives, you know, and what all they did. So, you know, that's another reason too, you know, writing the book for people to see that we're human beings, you know what I'm saying? We have choices we could make, things are right, things wrong, you know. That's a next thing to I wanted to portray was that, you know, we're all humans, you know.
So when you were growing up and going in our school system, what impact would it have had on you as a young
Oh,
reader to see stories with little girls with, curly hair, brown skin? What would that have meant to you growing up?
that I think that would have been a real encouragement for me. Like I said, I like to write, and my brother and I, he passed away, but we both love to write poetry. And if I saw like I read a lot of poems from black poets, so that kind of encouraged me to write poetry. If I had seen as a little girl books with, you know, little girls that look like me with, you know, curly hair and afros. You know what I'm saying? Oh, that would have intrigued me, like to even start writing my own story back then. You know, it would have been really, really, it would have been different. It would have been a different experience. Like I said, when I got into Miss LaRock's class in 12th grade and we read Richard Wright, I was like, oh my gosh, this man can write. And then in my first year of college, I started to collect books from black authors and started reading. I had like a lot of books. My mom always bought us books, you know, and we always read, but it wasn't books from us. So when I learned about that there were black authors out there, I started collecting the books. I mean, I have well, I had. They're all in storage at home, but I need to bring them up. I have a lot of books from black authors. I loaned some out, and I was kind of sorry I did that because you don't get your stuff back. But
Who are
I
some
do.
of the authors, Valrica, who are some of the authors? You mentioned having a large collection of black authors. Who are some of the authors that
That's really
that you enjoy and that are inspired by?
um. Okay, let me think. On um, some of the books weren't all kid books. There was some. What's her name? Oh gosh. A novice. Okay, calm down.
So are you reading like Langston Hughes?
Yes. And what's her name? She writes these love novels. Oh gosh. I have most of her books.
Who,
She has the
Zane?
afro. Who?
Zane?
Yes. I have
Uh-huh.
most of her books, and then I have the other lady. She came out a little later. She came out like in the 90s. The elderly lady. Oh Jesus.
But still there's so
Yeah,
many more authors now
yeah,
that you can find
yeah.
that again are speaking
It's
about the
rich.
Black experience.
Yes, it's rich. And you know what I like too? A lot of kids are writing. A lot more children are writing children's books. A lot more Black kids are writing children's books, and I think that's the next thing. That's thing. And like I was telling you about Johanse and Zaid. There's Julio Peterson. He wrote 2 books. You know. So, and another person that kind of inspired me too was oh gosh, just had his name on the top of my head.
Well,
Miss
there are lots of local authors, many of
No,
whom
what's
we've
his
been
name? On he
fortunate
went
to
to
showcase.
church with us. What's his name?
But while you're thinking about that, who is your writing mentor? I know you talked about Miss LaRock back at Central
Yeah,
High, English
Miss Laura.
teacher.
Yeah.
So she was a writing mentor, encouraged you
Yes.
to write. But who would you say is a mentor now, and that's someone that really guides you in your writing journey?
Well, I want to go back to college. When I was in college, I started to write some stories, and Dr. Jean Emmanuel, he was like, "You could really write." I was like, "Oh yeah," I said, "Well, I remember my English teacher in 12th grade telling me, you have a good skill here with your writing skills." And then when I went to college, Dr. Emmanuel, he was like, "You should write more. You could really write." I was like, "Oh, okay." Another person who I truly, truly admire is Alcest Lewis Brown. Alcest is one of my greatest mentors. I mean, I look up to her so much. Like, she's just incredible. She's just an overall incredible person and a good writer. Um, and right now she's just, yeah, my biggest mentor is Alcest.
What
Yes.
can you tell us about your writing process? Um, how do you get the stories out of your head and onto the page?
Okay. So I suffer from a little bit of insomnia. So what I do is, like the nights that I can't sleep, I just get on the computer and um like I just started writing about one of my stories. I have like 6 finished and I'm writing the 7th. I started writing about a trip we took back home to Aruba. So I couldn't sleep. And I just said, I just picked up my laptop and I sat on my bed and I just started typing. I just type. And then when I finished, I put it down. I leave it for a while, a month or so. And then I go back to it and I make corrections. And then I go back, I put it back down again. I don't trouble it for another month and then I pick it back up again and make more changes. So as my books get to my editor, um, then once this one is finished, I send it to her and she does the editing. Yeah.
So, do you self-publish or do you work with a publisher?
Okay, so my first book was self-published. And I was up for award, but because my book was self-published, they didn't want to use the book. So I decided that henceforth I'll use Caribbean Writer as my publisher, so that I could have some kind of publisher instead of instead of self-publishing. So
For
yeah,
a child who is not from the Caribbean, right? Will they still see themselves in your story?
you know, what I like is with my story, I try to explain like St. Croix and try to explain the tambran, like what a tambran is. And so that if anybody that comes from anywhere and they go to the island and they see, the fruit, they'll be like, oh, I know this. Or even if they go into a grocery store up here, we have all these markets and stuff and they could see the fruit and say, hey, that's the fruit that the lady had in her book, that kind of way. My granddaughter took the book to school, and the librarian, um, she when my granddaughter went into the library, she was like, "This is my grandma's book." She was showing off, I guess. And she said, "I have that book. I bought that book." And my granddaughter was like, "Really?" And she had the book on the shelf.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was like, when she came home, she was so elated. She was like, I took the book to show the librarian, but she already ordered the book. I was like, okay.
And
Yay.
that's definitely a proud moment. And what I liked in your story is that you talked about all of the things that can be made with tamarind. You talked about
Right.
tamarind balls and
Yes.
tamarind stew. You
Yes.
talked about all of the things that can be made. So it was
Yes.
also very educational for the person who would be
That's the
reading.
purpose too. Not
Mm-hmm.
just to write a story, but for people to learn about the Virgin Islands and what we do in the Virgin Islands.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just about the story. It's educational as well for anybody that picks up the book. You know.
Have you written anything, any other works besides Rika and the Tamarind Tree?
I just finished Rika in the Caulfield,
Mm-hmm.
and I also just finished. Well, not just finished. I finished it already. I just sent it to another illustrator because my illustrator is he's into his kids, so he doesn't have the time anymore. So I got a new illustrator. You're gonna see a new look in Rika. And then I just wrote 12 skits in the same manner that Anton Teotard wrote. I may be saying his name wrong. Teotard. But I just wrote 12 skits for students to use in the classroom, following the same pattern as Anton Teotard. Yeah.
And that would be the Sarah and Addie skits.
Yes, that's the Sarah and Addie skits. I just
Mm-hmm.
wrote 12 of those. Well, I wrote 12 of those over the 2 years I've been here. So I wrote 12 of those skits. And all five of those skits will be done in the fall with WTJX.
Nice. So why is it so important for you to tell these stories that elevate our culture?
I think that is we we're going to lose a generation of children if we don't put them learning our culture, if we don't put it out there. It's so important to know who you are and where you come from. I am not from St. Croix. I'm from Aruba. So I have a broad spectrum of of islands,
Mm-hmm.
because I've been to St. Martin. One of my stories is about St. Martin. I have family in St. Martin. I've been to Aruba. I've been to Curacao. Bonaire. All of those will be in my books. In the series of my memoir. Where I've traveled. And I think it's so important, not just because of St. Croix, but just the Caribbean in a whole. Having people know that, people come from the Caribbean and we're intelligent. We have imagination, just to open the door for people to know what we have and who we are.
Mm-hmm.
That I think that's so important. And for generations to come, when I pass, somebody pick up Rika in the tamarind tree or Rika in the cow field, they could say, "Oh my gosh, this woman did all this crazy stuff," and they could say, "Wow, she had fun as a child." And if tamarind trees are still around, if people don't even know what cow field is. I was
Mm-hmm.
asking a child the other day, what cow field is, and what's a cow field? I never heard of a cow field, you know. So just to provide um, the opportunity to learn about the island, to learn about islands, to learn about culture. Culture is so important. You don't know who you are if you don't know your culture. You don't
Well,
know.
I'd love for you to share a passage from Rika and the Tamarind Tree with our audience. If you have a favorite passage that you can read.
Well, my favorite passage. Uh, my favorite passage. Rika was a very stubborn little girl. She edged a little further on the branch, trying to pick as much tamarind from the Kraken branch. Ayo, give me a chance to get more tamarind. Oh, wow, this branch has plenty tamarind. Look, a coming down in a little while. Another cracking sound was heard, and Richie yelled out, Rika, that branch is about to break. Rika, 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 the branch going to break. He sounded real scared. You have a goat mouth, Rika yelled at the top of her voice. This branch isn't about to break. I will get one more tamarind for the road. Crick, crack, crack, crack. The branch gave away. The branch and Rika were falling. It seemed like Rika was falling for an eternity as she fell to the ground. That's my favorite.
And in that, we see again in the character that Rika is fearless. She is reaching for that tamarind, even though it's higher than she should be, further out in the branch than she should be. And I really enjoyed your story. But what do you see your legacy as a writer and as a culture bearer?
Ooh, that's a heated question, Shawna. Oh wow. Wow. Legacy, huh? Wow. Um, I'm not sure. I don't know. I just hope for people to be inspired and, like Rika, take chances, explore, learn, um, you know, step out of the box and, just try to achieve and not be, like you said, don't be afraid of anything. Just be fearless and know that everything and anything is possible, just that I would hope that people see that, uh, in me and all the stuff I've done as an author. Yeah, that would be awesome.
So, what's next for you, and what would you say to that person out there who has a story to tell?
I would say to write, Just write it down. Get somebody to edit the story for you. Um, just take that chance. Don't be afraid. Just take the chance and do it. You never know how far you get and who you'll influence. I think that's the most important thing, to be an influence and a positive influence on our children, on the community. That's the most important.
And I think that is also one of the key messages of this book, to be fearless, to be empowered, and to reach for things and not limit yourself.
Right.
And I think that is one of the best messages that Rika and the Tamarind Tree could certainly pass on to our audience. So it's been a pleasure to learn more about our local talent, Valrica Bryson, and her book, Rika and the Tamarind Tree. For more information on this book or any of the books featured on this program, visit our website at www.wtjx.org. We appreciate your support of our local authors, and we'll see you next week when we take another book from the Bookcase.
The views expressed on this program are not necessarily those of WTJX, its board, staff, or underwriters. This program was underwritten in part by
Janelle Encarnacion Art.
and viewers